So those of you who came to hear about BORO rather than about theories of meta-ontology, hopefully will get a little bit of your fill. Okay. Same rules apply. There will, well, hopefully, if it's purple, I should jump over them, because I think there are a bit more slides in this section, so if I don't, I won't finish, but I think Sal will no doubt just stop me when the time comes. Okay, so there are 3 sessions, and I really want to try and sort out the context, partly because, as I said before, I think that in terms of the community, I'm a bit of an outlier, an alien, and I just would like to try and make clear, if you like, characterize my alienness, but also try and show how it fits into, if you like, with the rest of the community. I'm going to look at the BORO ontology, and then I'm going to try and do the bCLEARer methodology, and I think that my argument, even though it's not necessarily in the title, is actually this process of formalization, the process of interoperating between systems, is more worthy. It's not the only thing, obviously, but it's worthy of more attention, and maybe actually where, at least in the early stages, where the interesting things happen, and it'll actually help inform the other stages. But I think that not just us as a community, but in general, people focus much more on the product, and that's what I'll do at the beginning, as you can see from the structure. So let's go through. So unlike the other, well, I don't think this is strictly true, but it is that BORO's been run, if I look back in retrospect, more as giving a toolkit for people to do things, and people have used it to do various things, and different people have used it in different ways. Whereas I think other ones, and I think it was particularly true of early BFO in a sense, as they said, look, this is the way to do it. We've only got one thing, and it's quite clear what you want. So you've got a single standard, and this is the way it works. I think it's not quite true, because then they say, oh, it's a core, and then you can use it in different ways. And I think, where's Stefano? Stefano was clear with Dolce. You've got this Dolce, so you've got this nice thing that's referenced, but the idea is you should use it in different ways. So it's not a black and white thing. But I think I would say that BORO, if you look at its history, has been very much focusing on just providing a set of tools, rather than saying, this is the standard, you have to follow it. That's not to say that people haven't taken it and produced standards. There have been standards produced, but it's not the way you've done it. And when on reflection we talked about this, what we wanted to be able to do is be able to speed up evolution, because we think there are going to be changes there are going to be changes in view. And I think as soon as you start you have a product that you've got to support, and you then want a new version, but you want backward compatibility, it's slowing you down. So our focus has very much been on how do we speed up evolution, and how do we allow people to as far as possible, to flexibly tailor to a variety of situations. I still think the corporate mindset, certainly when you go into enterprises, they much prefer a product. They just buy this, the problem solved, they don't have to think about it anymore. But I'm not too sure, given that we're early stages of innovation, that's the best approach. Yes, and I think there was a workshop, actually here, there was a Fermi workshop where I talked about the problems of premature standardization. And I think it is an issue in the community, and particularly with the ISO standard. I'm not at all in favor of. There's no harm in having something written down, but I think it's in the early days, if you're trying to encourage innovation, having a standard is it seems a really odd way of going about it. Okay, so I started work on this in the late 1980s, and probably one of the reasons for the way it ends up the way it was is that we were doing legacy re-engineering. So we got this process of moving data. Well, there was actually a series of them, moving data from one system to another. At the time, we looked at it, and it was incredibly painful, and we thought there would be a better way. And we ended up developing an ontology through a series of accidents, just odd random accidents. We ended up developing it. And then in the early 90s, this tied down more. There's a book from '96 which was describing what's going on, and then it sort of moved on from there, mostly in the commercial domain rather than the academic domain. Yes, okay. There are 2 bits of it, and I think that if you read the book, the large part of it is actually describing the process. And in fact, at the time we redid it, one of the things we're in an IT world is we're trying to say, look, was having a cost argument, is you've got a systematic process whereby you can take data from one system and move it to another, and you've got a systematic set of rules that if you follow this will happen, and there'll be all these other benefits that will flow from it. So we're really actually, the thing that was in our mind when we look back and look at it was this process for doing things. And it was a commercial job, it was in the financial sector, I think I can't remember now. The goals were commercial or enterprise oriented, and the theory was just a tool that we used for doing something. I think what happened in towards the late 90s is people became interested, and certainly in the noughties, people said we want an ontology, we want the top level, this is the kind of product we want to buy, and sort of it crystallized. But right from the beginning, it's true. And I think what's happened in the last, I don't know, 5 years or so, it's been clearer and it's become clearer. This is a John joke, he likes saying this. It's become clearer that we need bCLEARer. It's become clearer that you need to have some kind of process for going bottom up. And I mean, John points out to me is that, okay, we big this up and we do it, but I mean, he's been doing, everyone does it. It's not like I'm not trying to say we're doing, I think what's novel is we're highlighting the fact that we're doing it, and hopefully what you'll see, and you might find it really boring and decide you don't want to do it, is we're trying to be rigorous and careful about how you do the process. And we're trying to reflect on it. And what we're finding as well, the tools of ontology, if we apply it to the process and we start engineering, change the nature and structure of it. And that's, I think, part of, if you like, the way in which I believe as a community that we need to go forward. I showed this to, I can't remember who, someone the other day, and they misunderstood it. They thought this was a process diagram in the sense of these are the stages you go through. Really what we're trying to set, okay, so it seems to, I've been particularly assertively in the last year or two with colleagues like John and Giancarlo and Stefano. Well, no, I remember doing it in the noughties with Nicola, when I was with Nicola in Padova, and 1999 and 2000, I think. Stefano? Yeah, it is right. Yeah, I remember saying to him as well, this stuff can be applied across the whole enterprise. If you take a big enterprise, you look at its IT budget, at least half of its budget, this can have an impact. And what this is trying to say here, so if you need to do the requirements for a system, if you need to do a standard for a domain, if you need to look at a system and see what's going on, you need to configure a system, you need to build a system, you have a system, you need to transform it, you've got a system, you need to say, in all of these cases, there's ways of getting ontology involved, or top ontologies involved, this kind of process involved. And that means that in terms of, I know this sounds commercial, but if you look at it in terms of the IT budget, the bit that you can try, there's an enormous amount that you can attack. And if you look at what people are doing with the semantic web technology and things like that, it's a very, very small part of the overall IT ecosystem that they're dealing with. And I think that's a lack of vision in terms of it. And I think once you, and I mean, okay, we think it's a lack of vision. I was talking to Giancarlo, who's there with Sergio, I can't remember when, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, we were discussing it. We all agreed that it needed to be done. I won't personalise it. John and I have talked about it a lot. We're all talking about it. Some are more interested, some are less interested, but I'm not sure if it's an interest rather than a disagreement that this is the scope that it can take. Yeah, this is just, I think, is this a purple slide? Maybe it should or shouldn't. This is just, yeah, this is internally they wanted to try and analyse what's going on. This is something they produced, giving you some idea of the breakdown of the different kinds. So this is, if you go back to here, I know they haven't got the colours, but these colours are the different types of projects. So we do different kinds of projects. This is the ones you can do. So it's been used on all these. It's not as if, in theory, it can be. What we're saying is, on reflection, when we look through, these are the kind of projects that we did. Here's a breakdown. Here, we did a lot of transform. Transform is like, intellectually, it's if you think about, I've got this tool, how should I use it? It's got a hammer, the nail looks like a transform, yeah? But there are all these other ways, if you're more imaginative, how you can use it. The thing I've now started making is I've made it, in the early slide, I didn't even have bCLEARer on it, because these are the people who've gone from toolkit to standard, if you like, the various standards that have been used over the years. What's intriguing is that very few people have tried to standardize a process. Now, I have some sympathy with that, because we internally have tried to standardize it, and every attempt to standardize, after we document the process, when we start doing it again, we find we have to do it in a different way. So it's not it's a non-trivial. I think we're better at it now. We know what we're doing. But it's a non-trivial thing. So you can understand. It's a more difficult thing, so you can understand why they haven't done it. I think it's maybe more important, so maybe they should do it. But nevertheless, you can understand that you're a senior manager. You'd much rather buy something off the shelf that has the answer. This is the way to do it. Then, oh, you've got to train your people up. They've got to do all this work. As a project, it seems to be a nicer solution if you believe that you get the same benefit from both. You buy buy the ontology. You don't buy the process. Why should I buy you do the process. You do it, get it done, and give me the answer. Yeah? Which isn't the way it works, unfortunately. Or so I claim. Okay. I was trying to work out how to understand what we're doing, and I think there's been a lot of focus, which is good, and I think that's a good way of explaining it. By the way, there's a lot of focus in the previous slides when they're saying that there is this. You have to do it this way. You have to do it. These are the rules about how you do it. This is the way you do it. What I want to try and do is I think if I can internalize a way of thinking with a way of principles, then when you come, I won't have to tell you about the rules. I mean, I might mention the rules to you, and if you're doing something wrong, I might say, oh, there's this rule, you shouldn't do it that way. But I'm not asking you to follow the rules. I'm asking you to internalize the way things work, so you naturally follow the rules. I mean, I'm not saying don't have rules. I'm not saying don't have a rule checker to check whether you're doing the rules. And in fact, some of the rules of thumb, I was resonated when some of the stuff you were doing, John. I can't remember the rules of thumb. yeah. I was looking at that. That's yep. That happens. Yes, if you're a practitioner, in fact, on Stefano's as well. I think there were one or two things that Stefano was doing. Yeah. That's. I mean, if you're a practitioner and you've seen these things, you recognise. Rules are canonical rules, which has the grid, Stefano's grid, which you must follow, and then the rules of thumb that both of everyone talked about. And I think I'm sorry, it's a while since Giancarlo's, and if it's over 2 days ago, sort of it's a dim mist in my mind. So I'm sure he said the same thing. Yep. So I came across. I've come in the last, I don't know, 5 or 8 years or so. I've got to more and more like Peter van Inwagen. My initial reaction was. As a spontaneous, dislike's unfair, but the way he did came to his conclusions wasn't to my taste. But what I found is if you read the details, he actually is really, really good at getting to. He understands what he's talking about. So what you need to do is you read his criticisms and how he understands it. I personally don't accept his conclusions, but you can learn a lot from him. But anyway, he got this nice paper, What's an Ontological Category? I used to use Peter Simon's paper. Another nice paper. This happens to be, I don't know, less boring because it's new. What I'm amused by is I wonder about. I think there are silos in academia. I realise this is an opinion that you academics will totally deny. There's no silos. There's massive interdisciplinarity. Yes, every department talks to every other department. But what I'm amazed by is I'm sure there is what's the word? There's a leakage between it. I was amused by, I can't remember, was it a thing in their parts or something? Kit Finer, one of his paper quotes Armstrong. Someone will know. Armstrong on databases, yeah? I mean, he's got 3 quotes. It's Goodman, Quine, well, maybe Goodman, Aristotle, and Armstrong. I mean, Armstrong's up there with these other guys. And it's a really quoted paper on how you build databases. And the reason I'm saying that is, you remember Gruber talked about specification. One of the things that really grated for me is that I think that if you look at Gruber's definition of an ontology, to my mind, it's designed to irritate at least a philosopher. If I am a philosopher, what little philosophy I know, it grated. It's a specification of a conceptualization. Is that an ontology? Is it either a specification or a conceptualization? Okay, and Inwagen's more than happy to run with the specification here. And I wonder whether there's been some leakage, Gruber's effect Inwagen. And if I have it's a weird, maybe someone knows, is that if someone does know, I'd be intrigued. Is there a tradition in philosophy of talking about specifications of things? Yeah, okay. Oyston's not saying something immediately comes up. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, I'm wasting time and I don't have many slides. So the difference, I should have had a picture here, I realized afterwards. So what would be really good would be to put up the BFO picture, Dolce picture and the UFO picture, and look at them and compare. Ours is, we got we got fewer boxes. So I don't know whether that means we're worse or better, but we have many, many fewer boxes. It's much, much simpler. And if you think it from an architectural view, there's a reason, and it's because we're unified. So I think if you stratify more, you need more boxes to do what you're trying to do. And it's just something that happens. And I'm not trying to say which one's better. I mean, you can make parsimony arguments, and I know people do, but I think you should do that later. I mean, first of all, you need to see how these things work. And the big thing about an ontological category is that everything that exists belongs to one or only one of these categories. And so I think compared with some of the others, I think Barry admits that Barry says you can introduce new kinds of entities, I think. Yeah. So I'm making a completeness claim. I don't know, Steph. I'm not bothered. Don't worry, Stefano. But I think at least I'm saying, look, there's nothing else. This is the only things that is. And you can see why, in terms of the strategy I pursue, that it's easy for me to do this, and if I can do it, I should do it. The other thing is that there is this issue about criterion of identity and how you run with identity. So there is a way that's a tradition in late 20th century philosophy of running with identity that I follow with, which is extensional. So what I do, I have three categories. My categories are the bearers of identity criteria. And in a sense, so all of the questions of identity are all just settled up front before anything goes. All the problems, I'm not saying it solves any problems. It solves theoretical problems, but when you get on the practical ground, it just means that when you deal with something, it's not a problem with identity you're dealing with. In one of these more stratified ontology with stratification choices, it may turn on a question of what the criterion of identity is, if you can specify it, which is also another problem. It's just that whatever problem it is reappears on a different guise. So you have a practical problem, there is a practical problem, it's going to have to be solved. This is a tool. What this tool does is just saying, I'm setting it up in this way. There are these grounding relations. I'll deal with them more in the next slide because it's easier to explain. But we've got a very limited set of, if you compare them with the other ontologies, because of the way we've done, because of our parsimonious way of going about things. We've done it. There is actually, I'm probably jumping ahead. The difference between foundational and derived grounding relations is that you can cut it up in different ways. The way we've cut it up, the super subset relation or the subtype or the subsumption relation turns out to be derived, and the other ones turn out to be more fundamental, and that's a reflection about how you do it. It's possible to do it other ways. I'll maybe explain some more. I can explain outside about the different ways. And in a sense, as an engineer, I'm happy if I've got one answer, even if there are other answers, and even if they're almost as good, or even as good, or maybe even maybe if they're slightly better, I'll change. But I want to have one answer. I accept there are other ways of skinning this cat. Yeah. Individuals, we have our mereological extensional, so no two things can have exactly the same parts. I never like if two things have the same parts, they're the same things. So if they're two things, are they the same things? The Wittgensteinian thing. The background to this is classical mereology, also called Chem or Gem. Chem doesn't sound right. I'm used to calling it Gem, but that's showing my age. So if you go back 15 or 20 years, I think it was called Gem. Goes back to earlier work where it's formalized before. It's really it's an incredibly well-known theory, maybe not as well as set theory. Well, historically it's not been around. Is that true? No, I think I can never pronounce his name. Wisniewski 16, I think. ZF's before that, isn't it? ZF's 1906 or something. I don't know. Anyway, so they've both been around over 100 years, probably ZF and set theory. Well, Cantor was before, yeah. There's an incredible book I keep on saying by Achille, but Côte-Noire is, I don't know whether it's alphabetical or not. I'm sure Côte-Noire's got really good work, so I'm sure he did something. It's just I know Achilles' work better. The book is incredible, marvelous book. If you want to find out about mereology and read it. If you want to find out about how we read it, there's something that's much, much, much better that Sal and Oyston wrote. My name is on it. I just did the introduction where I did a little bit of marketing at the beginning. They did all the hard work. There's this incredible paper that will explain how all this works, far better than all the other stuff, of course. I think it's worth getting a feel for these logical theories and the way they fit together. So, and I think that if you want to look at the mereology stuff and the background to it, it's in Côte-Noire and Varzi. But it accepts universalism, or there's all sorts of different names for it. I think this is the latest name. I checked in Cotnoir. Is that I think I've seen it called other things, and it's just an unrestricted mereological fusion or composition. So once you've got that, you get extensionalism. And there's another thing in here which actually I don't mention, which goes back to Lewis, which is this notion of plenitude. If you create enough objects, then you've got enough objects for whatever you want to do. So the trick is to create enough objects, and some might be unimportant or some might be important, but you don't insist that they've all got to be natural. So the big problem is trying to find sort of, am I an object, but me without my hand isn't an object, or me and this mouse isn't an object? If I've got to allow one exist and the other exists, I've now got to have all these rules about which is an object and which isn't. If I say they all exist, and then I've got this secondary problem later on down the line of saying what's natural, I in a sense, for the early stages, I simplify things, because I haven't got to define what are the natural objects. Okay. That's interesting. I think there's a purple thing on here, but you can't see it because of the way. Maybe that makes them easier to read. Okay, so again, if you remember, I can't remember. Yeah, we went through ontological choices again from the survey, plugging the survey. Is that you need to look at the ontological choices. And I think if you're looking for individuals, there's quite a lot of the choices that we've already looked to, the unification and stratification choices, that have an impact on what turns out to be individuals. So you've got this, in order to get the theory to work, you've got to flesh out, and I think it'll become clearer when we look at the next way of describing. You've got to flesh out what individuals are, and we've got this stratification. And in every case, I don't know why I'm pointing to my slide. In every case my screen, every case we unify. This incredible parsimony. I remember Nicola saying that, I think they talk about Quine having a desert landscape. I mean, he was saying the same thing. He says, if you compare Dolce and BORO, it's like BORO, most of it missing, where's all this stuff if you compare the two? Again, if we look at this, recall location examples, is that if you're in BORO, you go for these superstandard. If you get typically, if you get exact coincidence, exact spatiotemporal coincidence, it's identity. That's the rule, if you go through. And what's good is to do, and I think it happened in some of the examples, and I think it'll happen to some extent I'm not sure, I can't remember on the test case what happened, is that's the thing that you're looking for, and then you need to say which metaphysical choice I'm making, and what you want to try and do is make it, if you're trying to build a model for anything, you want to try and make it consistently. So if you jump to the left for the first case, you should keep on jumping to the left, or, in other cases, if you want to do this alignment. So if you've got these two systems, and sometimes you jump to left, right here, sometimes the chances of you jumping to the left for the same thing to be able to match them up is unless you're lucky, is really low. One of the things, again, just to flesh it out, I don't think it comes out in the example, is that we take a Lewisian notion of individuals across all possible worlds. This is the way we deal with a modality. Modalities, it's interesting how much it appears in real systems. It's not clear because you don't have many modal type operators in systems. So when you can dig around and see it happening, it's a worry on the people who deal with top ontology in practical systems. I think it is there, but I'm not quite sure how much it surfaces itself. But anyway, we go for a possible world route. Okay, so this is just trying to say four-dimensionalism in physics is incredibly well established now. Sit there with Sklar and people like that in the philosophy of physics. This substantivism is well done. And basically, if you come even now in the 20th century, there's lots of stuff. If you go to the 21st, there's just lots and lots of stuff of four-dimensionalism. So I don't know how many, hundreds, thousands. I don't know. There's masses of stuff. Another ontological category is that it's had various names over the years, as that we work with different people and people fight over names. It's that having the right name is more important than what it means, and so we've gone from set to type. I can't think what else, but we've gone back and forth. So the latest fight we had was with a chap called Florio, and he was insistent that if they're extensional, they're sets. So we said yes, okay, Sal, you can do it. So they're now called sets. Set theory, again, well established, like mereology. I mean, I don't like ZF, but if you want ZF, you can have it. But you've got a choice. You've got a whole range of choice. And the big thing is no two sets can have exactly the same elements. If two sets have the same elements, the same set. Now, what's interesting when you come to the next section and we talk about constructionalism, if I've got enough time, is that this becomes explains. This is a rule at the moment. It isn't explained. And there's no constraints on what we use to build a set. You can have sets of sets, you can have sets of individuals, etc., etc. If you've got any collection of objects, you can have a set. And what all of the things you see in your model, if you have persons, aircraft, engines, in our terminology, if they've got lots of instances, they're a set. Then you have tuples. I think if you're trying to think about what relations are, it's always a problem. I think Russell's got something back in the beginning half of the 20th century where he worries about something in its inverse is the same event. He talks about it. I think there was some work done towards doing it. I think there's a standard mathematical way of dealing with it, which is the one we follow, which is a tuple, which is unsatisfactory. Kit did a really nice paper. I think it's 2011, neutral relations. Yep, okay. But he's not the only one. There's other stuff. There's people at UB. There's Maureen Donnelly's got some nice stuff, which I was reading. And in fact, one of the reasons I'm reading Peter van den Wagen is Maureen in a paper points to him, and I thought, this can't be right, this can't be right. And I started reading, I kept saying, this can't be right. But then after a while, I thought, this is actually really good. So lots of people have written on it. It hasn't, so it's actually, if you reflect on it, what's happened is people are, so we do a lot of coding. So one of the things you do when you're coding is you look for smells, you look for things that aren't quite right. And then you say, well, okay, maybe there's an opportunity to fix this. And for me, relations are a massive smell. So this works. You're running it, it works, but it needs to be fixed. There's plainly an error, and you've got all of these people having a fix. And okay, I'm going to be slightly rude. I know Kit. I think he called me a friend, so I'll call him a friend. Is that I think that his neutral relations is brilliant. It's marvelous. But it doesn't solve formally the question that we need to do is how we store relations in databases. It's not got the right structure, it's not got the right answer. And I think I'd say the same thing about his CLAP stuff. He's got this amazing intuition. I think he'd be a brilliant programmer about how things fit together. But I think because he's not done a lot of coding, he's not worked with a lot of data, or maybe I haven't got the vision. One of us has not got the vision to see how to implement it, yeah? Okay, so again, this is Peter van den Wagen. He called to the Bear-Quinian question, which is nice because he's being slightly dissing it, and in a sense, there is some sense where he disses it. And he's got three ways of talking about it. And this is the first he just dismisses completely. The second he sort of looks at and sort of dismisses, and then he's got his third own way, which is actually our first one, which is the ontological categories, the specification of. And let's actually go to Quine himself. So this is. I was talking with Francesco, was it with Francesco, someone? I can't remember. But Quine's got a nice style. So he's got this question, like he says, look, that there's a curious thing about the ontological problem is its simplicity. It can be put in 3 Anglo-Saxon monosyllables. What is there? And it can be answered moreover in a word, everything. And everyone will accept this answer as true. However, this is merely to say that there is what there is. There remains room for disagreement over cases, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is one way, but it's interesting. Lowe, who you wouldn't say is a natural, isn't the same camp as Quine, comes up with the same thing, and he's got this set of things whose existence is acknowledged by a particular theory. I mean, you can look at the date as well. Maybe in 10 years later, he would say something, theory or system of thought. So he's allowing for here, in a sense, and Quine did with his indeterminacy, he's allowing that there could be different theories, and these different theories will come up with different things that exist, but the ontology is the set of things that exist. And I think for us, that's really useful. So one of the things that we should be doing, and I was watching when, Stefano, when you were doing some of your answers, you actually had a list of all of the things that existed. So you had your inventory of your world, or your mini-world. And I think that's a really useful thing to do. And in fact, one of the exercise we do today is to try and come up with what inventory would we have given the assumptions we're making. I'm probably not going to do as much as I want to do. Okay, so let's go through. So Kit, I should probably go back. There's historical reasons, but I don't think I'm not a judge. It's not my expertise. I can't do the exegesis, but the way Kit starts defining this constructional thing is not the same way, to my mind, you can see that it's seeded by this other stuff. Kit himself refers to particularly on relations that generate. He's got a really new vision about way of doing things, and I was blown away by it when I started reading it. I met Kit in one of these. They're not. It's not FORS. What are the summer schools that they ran in? That Giancarlo ran a summer school in Brazil, and met Kit there, and we started talking about this, and I followed it up, and I was blown away about it. And that was in 2014, and that's why we started doing this work here. Here's a quote from him, and the idea is that you give me some things, I will have a constructor, and as a result of I create this. And if you give me the same things again, I construct the same thing. So that's the idea. It's like, I think, have we got the picture here? No, what is it? Maybe we're going to have to go. Yeah. If you think about it as a funnel, you have funnels of different types, different colors, whatever you want to call it. You have in this case, let's say you had a set funnel, which we've probably got on the next slide. If you put a number of things into the front end of the set funnel, you press the button, the set comes out the other end. So this is my gross simplification of Kit's incredibly subtle paper. So what he does, and there's a nice paper, which again is referred to in the survey, Schaefer's got what to multiply without necessity, and what he's trying to say is if you do your accounting, if you do your parsimony accounting, fundamental objects should cost more, because they should be more hard work than derived objects. And so what Kit's saying here is that if you have a constructor, when you're defining your ontology, as well as the basic objects, the givens, the starting objects, then when you're trying to assess it, you just look at your starting objects and your constructors, and everything else sort of comes for free. Schaeffer would say, comes at a much lower cost. Yeah. We did a lot of work with a national digital twin. I can't remember where it started, 2019, 2020, and we came up with a brick in the wall metaphor. I don't know whether it works or not. So this is the core construction ontology. Sal and Oyston have done a lot of really, really good work on it. The paper should be mentioned a few times here. I would suggest reading it. I think it's really great. I think it's a wonderful paper, wonderful work. Oyston's got a really interesting section at the back, heavy-duty stuff for the logicians. Okay, so again, with my IT hat on, and this is, if you like, a gross simplification. This is the cartoon version for people like me. Sal and Oyston probably going to look somewhere else when I explain it. But the idea is you start off, well, this is half true. We did a formalization where we actually had this structure in place. But in fact, let me do the next slide. So your background logical framework is pluralities, and I think it's probably on the next slide again. Sal and Oyston, without me this time, did a really good paper. Many in the one? I can't remember. Yeah, okay. A book, sorry, and it's free. You can download it. You want to find out about this. You have a general constructional framework, and in a sense, the thing that Kit inspired with us, if you've got a general notion of way to construct things, you can actually have a unified theory that covers everything else. So you've got one, if you're trying to think from a parsimonious point of view, you've got one theory that explains the bits and pieces. I'm going to go fast now. Okay, so this explains, you're going to have the slides, you can read the slides in your own time if you're interested. I find this funnel thing is the best thing that we found. It may be good, but the best thing found explaining it. But the also is the output. So what happens is as a result of going through this, you I can't think of the word. You create a relation. So what the set element relation is records the fact that the objects have gone into the hopper and come out the other end as a set. So the process of composition creates a composing relation. And in the case of element set, you've got the element set relations. I don't know why I'm pointing down there. You've got the element set relations down here. Again, part-whole relations. This is actually going from okay, so we've got two sides. So you can have some compositions, which is the top. So you put A and B in, and you get out the fusion of A and B, and you get here. You can, I think the other thing that I don't think we've, is that right?
Are you saying that this will happen in the same way every time with the same things? In other words, is it intrinsic to the stuff that you're shoving into the funnel
Absolutely. That's that. Yeah. So this is a formal theory. So it's not about, we talk about shoving in as if it was a process in time. This doesn't happen in time. That's a metaphor. Meaning Kit has a makes.
Can you explain this kit time business? I mean, it sounds as though it's a bit like making molecules out of atoms. That basically there's an intrinsic characteristic of the components that means that they can only compose in certain ways.
Okay. So I was really happy until that last sentence. So.
So that's why I wanted you to explain it.
Okay. So I think the idea is that there is a formal structure. It's not something in time, it's the way things break down. So the idea is if you take any plurality, sort of any collection, let's take sets, for example. You could do that with same with fusions. You take any plurality you like. What you can do with this is, and you do, this is, okay, so I don't know whether Salah or Royston should take over it because I might be blaspheming here, but in my mind, you have this pre-time, before God existed, before time existed, where you're doing this construction work, and you take all these collections and you have a series of stages. So it's Boulos stage theory, Peter? No? Yes? No? Okay, so you do something like the Boulos stage theory is you keep on doing all the stages till you exhaust it. So what you've got is you've got a formal structure that tells you what things exist. And it's not the molecular atoms I'm worried about. It is.
Free will.
Sorry?
I said by free will, as I mean, there's only certain ways that things can play out. Is this what you're saying?
Okay. No, so remember I mentioned plenitude earlier. So what we're doing is we're creating. It's like having an energy machine that creates more energy than you could ever want. There's no constraint on how much energy. You get every possible thing, every possible combination you can ever want is already there. And so it's all pre-made. So let's say that you wanted to, you've got 6 molecules that can be permuted in any way. What this does is it permutes them in every single possible way. There's no other possible way to permute them and gives you, at the start, before you do anything, you've got them all, which is plenitude. So anything you can possibly want, any kind of gerrymandered individual, any kind of gerrymandered set is there at the beginning. Now, most of them you probably won't want because they're too gerrymandered, but people are perverse. They'll find a gerrymandered set they want. It's already there. It's being created. A part of the process creates every possible set you can have. There's no constraint on which ones you can have. It's every possibility's there. Okay, Sal gave a half nod, so it wasn't too wrong, yeah? Okay. Are you right, Peter? We can talk afterwards. But I think I think the game, there's a series of games being played here. One of the game is we're having a formal constructor. So formally we can create stuff. The other game that's being played is plenitude. Is we're trying to create everything we can possibly need before we start. So we never have to construct anything after we start. So before the game, anything that you want is already constructed. Provided you don't want abstract objects, and on and on and on. There's probably a list of things, which is, we can come outside. So there's another thing that we need to properly formalize, but if you like, we've described about what we want to do, and it links back to it's a combination of another thing. So Schaffer talks about priority monism and priority of the one. He's an actualist, not a pluralist in terms of possible worlds. But if you're a possible world, if you take the pluriverse, which is the few... 5 minutes, not to stop, okay. So if you take the pluriverse of all possible worlds and you have a decomposer, not a composer, you can decompose to all the individuals. You just run this and you run this through all the stages and you've got everything you want. And in fact, let's go... Yeah, okay, that's what this is trying to say. You've got everything. And this is all done formally. So, can we do it at the end? Sorry. Really sorry. Yes, I want you to ask, but I've got, Sal's a harsh taskmaster. Okay, so there are a series of key aspects. So I think we talked about completeness. It explains the categories, it explains relations. So all the other things that I was talking about earlier that look like rules or look like this is the way it works, emerge as a result of the way in which you do construction. And read Kit's paper on this, because Kit makes the same point. He says it's amazing. This is a really simple explanation. You start with this really simple things, and it explains everything. And I thought the first time I read it, I thought you shouldn't be selling. In philosophy you don't sell. But he's right. I mean, he is right. It was a factual statement. And if you wanted more details, again, this stuff is expanded in more detail in Sal and Oyston's paper. I'm going to zoom through this. So there's one thing I want to do here is that okay, we have chronology to get time, is that one of the things that, what's interesting, there are a number of early ontologies. There's, I'm not sure it's in the alphabet, I can't remember. No, Carnap has an early ontology, and there are various other people. No, it's not, who is it? Oh, I need to remember the name. The name's gone. Woodja. Have these various ontologies, and one of the things that as a feature of them is they talk about world lines, and there's another guy whose name, it's in the references here. There's a way of creating world frames from world lines. So there's a way of, there's what we do at the next level of the ontology, there's some more detail in here which you'll get to, is you can create other formal structures before you then go and create things in the main, your persons and aeroplanes and so forth. Now I'm going to zoom through. Now this is quite important in a sense, or maybe should we do it after the break, Sal, or how many, what do you want to do?
If it's an initial stopping point, let's take
okay. Yeah. Hello. Ah, that's good. Guys, I've vastly overrun my time, so I need every second. You're stealing, yet there's very important information that you're not going to learn if you don't... Oh, that's on. It's on. Okay, so I'll start. Even though you're talking at the back, I'm going to talk over you. Ha! Francesco, how can you do this to me? He's not listening. Okay, all right. This is the most important bit, and the bit the people at the back who are talking won't learn, and they won't be able to do the practical problem. Okay, right. So we have, probably in a simple-minded and a pragmatic way, over the last, I don't know, where are we? Since 1987, I can't do the arithmetic, say 30 years or so, we've been trying to develop a process for interoperability. And we've come up with, I mean, because from an IT point of view, we're worried about the pragmatics of it all rather than the theory. So we've tried to develop a structure. We didn't realize it at the time, because I don't think this is in the late 80s. We didn't realize it at the time, but in fact, we're doing sort of kind of a manual pipeline. And that we try to define the pipeline to various stages. It's gone through various morphs. I'm sure it'll go through more. I think we can just sort of vaguely justify pragmatically some of the stages, and I'll explain how. I don't think we've worked out, I don't know whether it has a theoretical underpinning. That would be an interesting question. But pragmatically, it's important to, if you like, segregate things. Everyone who's worked in IT knows that. These are the stuff we go through. If you wanted to do it and do different ones, I mean, IT people like to be different, that's fine. I'm just telling you about the ones we do and how we do it. These are the stages here. I can tell a slightly off-color story about it, but probably not when we're being recorded, so come and ask me afterwards if you like off-color stories. The first stage is collect, and what you're trying to do is you want to make sure that when you start the process, you don't introduce people helping you by tidying up the data. And the number of times we've been given a data set and we're told we want a raw data set and they mustn't change anything, and they give it to us and they say, oh yes, we find it doesn't work. We say, oh, he's done this, this and this, and we can say, but it's ruined the data. You know, how would you expect us to do anything with data after you've done? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so it's really important to collect raw data. What you do in load, as we'll talk about when we go to the examples, is you want to get something structured. You want to work with structured data. So you want to be in the land of machines talking to machines as soon as possible. At the risk of, I'm trying to do this nicely, at the risk of bigging up John. Apologies, Stefano. But if you look at okay, ciao. Is that if you look at the work of Giancarlo and Stefano, you'll see that it was tech. Okay, you're laughing, Guido, so it's not so bad. Okay, they didn't use data. We actually had a discussion when we were doing the examples, and I said, look, guys, can we use data? And John is just brilliant. You know, he did it. And the others were going, why do we want to use data? I think I would like, if we meet in, I don't know, 2 years' time or 1 year's time, I mean, we had a long discussion last night. I had a long discussion with Stefano and the sauna about this, is that everyone should be starting, or if you start with unstructured data, you find a way of structuring it as soon as possible, which is what we're going to do in the practical examples. So you're worried about machines talking to machines, and if you get machines, okay, maybe they're getting clever and clever about reading text, but in our simple-minded way of doing things, let's try and get it to data. Data's more of a natural language for machines, where natural language is a natural language for us. So you want to get to the data stage, and you want to see when you've got data and you exchange data, how you need to manage it and transform it in order for it to be able to interoperate. Evolve, we'll talk a little bit about later. It's a stage where it goes on, and the idea is in these first three stages, you're stuck in the pipeline of a particular data set. Assimilators, when you're trying to organize how you handle across data sets, it can be the case that you've got a multi-system load, so essentially you're merging inside or outside, so that you can argue theoretically what's the difference between that and assimilate. It just depends on how you organize things. So it's a pragmatic distinction. And the big thing, I think, is you really want to, when you get the big difference, and I probably won't have time to talk about it properly, is you want to reuse your data. So after you've done your data and you think you've cleaned it and you think it's marvelous and you think it's wonderful, if you don't shove it into an operating machine and it turns out to at least work, you really haven't done anything, yeah? It's you're marking your own homework. You're saying it's wonderful. Now maybe your judgment is brilliant, so maybe your marking is right, but I wouldn't trust it. I mean, I wouldn't trust my own marking, yeah? You can, one of the things that happens, anyone who's worked with pipelines, it's quite interesting, you read the pipeline literature, they evolve over time. So they extend over time, so you do this, so when you run your pipeline, when you're doing pipeline management, if you're a data engineer, you know these things. What's going to happen here? You get multiple things, and the idea is that you build up your foundational ontology, and then you reuse, and this is important. And the idea is that part of what you're looking for is semantic maturity. If you invite me along, I can talk about semantic maturity later. There's not really enough time now, but the idea is to get more semantic maturity. Marketing purposes, you need to have a picture that sort of looks attractive to users. We paid a lot of money to get someone to build this picture that they told us was attractive to users. I think people have used it and say it works. I find the schematic more useful, is that because what it's showing is multiple systems coming in and multiple systems going out. So this is the ideal, because the more systems you've got, there are trade-offs, but the more systems you've got, the more triangulation you do, the more accuracy you can get. So you want more systems in, and the more systems out, you can test whether it works. So what you're trying to say is this kind of stuff you've got is a genuine interlingua. Does it work across all these different systems? That's one of the things that you're after. This builds let me unbuild. Okay, so the other interesting thing, which I think I'm trying to remember, I've had discussions with some of you, is that we'd be happy to run half of the process, to not even engage with the top ontology. In the early projects, if you're trying to work with a project, it may be that the data system that you've got needs to be restructured in such a way so that you can work with it, and that's a big enough task and gives enough value, restructure it. You don't engage with the ontology at all. So that's a perfectly good bCLEARer project. No ontology. I mean, you might have an ontological sensibility, and I know that Jonathan, I've done a lot of work with Jonathan, and I've got another good friend, Mesbah Khan. We do work on it, and they start doing it, and they want to do it. They've got to do this, and I'm like, not allowed to. You mustn't do this. For the separation of concerns, it's really important you have a hygiene about what you're doing. The thing, okay, I need to go really quick. So there's a paper. I don't know where's the paper mentioned. The paper is mentioned. The paper's not mentioned there. We have a paper, Sid's paper, which I can share on you, where we try to talk about the design space for the process. And one of the things we're trying to say is that often in our community, and this is what the paper talks about, is you don't include data when you're trying to do your ontology. So, and one of the things that you know when you run a volume test, if you're building systems, when you actually start putting data into it, the system performs in ways you didn't expect. So essentially what they're doing is you're building an ontology and you're trying to say it works without doing proper volume testing across data. And one of the things that, there's a thing in that's going up a shift left, it's now big in data engineering practices, you want to be able to test as far as possible, and one of the things you need to do is put as much data in as far as possible. And the other thing is this thing that I talked about earlier, is you want to be working in this space of, if you like, of levels of digitalization. You want to be working in the computer, the machine-to-machine space. Okay, let's see. Okay, so, and this is, maybe I should mention this because it's useful. So we separate between something we call computerization and ontologization. So one of the things you find is when you get a data set, and you'll find with the data set you work this afternoon, we hope you'll find, or we hope we'll persuade you that you have found, or we'll show you that there are things that you can take the data set and just by surfacing your inferred intuitions about the people who build it, you can make the original intended interpretation more explicit. So no ontology, nothing at all. You're just trying to make this data, put the data into a better state before you start the ontologization. So you need to separate this hygiene surfacing, and there's a lot of, it's interesting, a lot of the, I was going to say metaphors or the ways of working of ethnography where you embed yourself in another culture and you understand what I'm saying, is that's what you're doing here. You're not trying to infect them with your ontology, you're just trying to surface the way they're doing things and getting it clean. That's a first stage, because in a lot of cases the data's been for performance or historical or various other reasons, it's not clean. You also may have inconsistencies because 5 or 6 build it, you try and resolve it, but within the community, you're not trying to taint it with your interpretation. Then you do the ontologization. So hopefully when you do the exercise this afternoon, you should try and separate these two stages. This is just saying that, trying to give you some idea of what's going on. And just quickly, ontology is not all there is. There's work we've done. We did some work on agentology. If you look at systems, there's always a they say in there. You need the indexical I. If more and more you look at system, it's there. A clock has the indexical, and then the other thing that we're doing some work with Andreas, who isn't here today, which is looking at they say doxastology and two-dimensional Lewisian semantics. So there's other stuff. As soon as you start working with real systems, ontology is not all there is. I mean, I can give another story about epistemology and everything else, but as soon as you start working with systems, ontology is the foundation, but it's not all there is. So now let me try and